I feel like with this episode, I need to start with I don't know, Bow Chicka Wow Wow. Is this? Yeah,
I feel like for this episode, I'm advertising poppers.
For those who aren't watching on YouTube, Chloe is wearing a t-shirt that says "Rush" with like an electricity bolt through it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm saying nothing.
There's two kinds of people.
What we are about to embark upon, Earthlets, is about half an hour, 40 minutes of Chloe making me increasingly uncomfortable as we discuss sex and sexuality not just Judge Dredd, but in 2000 AD. Content warning for not just the discussion, but also the secondhand embarrassment that everybody will get off of me. Um, so you've been warned, Earthlets, because this is
Oh, In Orbit every Wednesday.
Get 2000 AD now. Get.
Borag Thung, Earthlets, welcome to In Orbit every Wednesday, the galaxy's greatest podcast show. I am your host, Molch-R. This is your host, KLO-E, and we are here for another half an hour or so of chat about the galaxy's greatest comics, 2000 AD. Just to thank everybody, as usual, for all their feedback on the last episode, which feels like it was a million years ago. What did we talk about?
Batman? Detective.
Batman.
We talked about detectives.
I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about our mental state most of the time, is we can't even remember what happened last week. But the reason it feels like it's been a million years is the first part of my epic interview with John Wagner went live on Saturday, which
It's
is
so good.
he's just great, isn't he?
It's so good. He's just fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, if you haven't listened to that yet, Athletes, do head along to our well, wherever you get this podcast from, whether it's on YouTube or Acast, and have a listen, because it's in the intro I use the word candid, and it's it's a real privilege for me that John can be as candid when I'm interviewing him as he is, because he's relatively a man of few words in interviews. So this was 3 hours of us chatting, and I'm just editing episode 2 now, and it's where we transition from the pub to sitting in front of the log burner in his house, in the very, very quiet countryside. I've never. It's always a shock when I leave the urban environment of where. And I live in Oxford. It's not exactly the
It's not
heart
a
of London.
bustling metropolis.
Yeah, but there's always the roar of traffic, so it's always slightly spooky when I go into the countryside. But we transitioned to sitting in front of his fire with a couple of glasses of wine. And this episode is going to be a bit more. I was about to say sober, but it's not, because we're half cut by that point. But more, talking about Carlos, Alan, various things about the last 50 years, and yeah. So thank you for everyone who's enjoyed that, and there's more to come on this episode, because it's Valentine's Day this weekend. We thought we would do the long-threatened episode where we talk about sex and sexuality in 2000 AD.
You've been
And for those
avoiding
on
this for a
YouTube,
year.
yeah, for those on YouTube, you'll have seen Chloe's eyes light up at that sentence, because she's got opinions, as I'm sure you could imagine. So, yeah, the history of sex and sexuality in 2000 AD is, I mean, it's a mixed picture, would you say, Chloe?
It's kind of a weird one. I did
Mhm.
a lot of rereading and a lot of research, kind of prepare like excitedly prepare, like manically preparing for this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not that there is a lack of it. I think a lot of people kind of look at immediately go to Dread, as is most people's want. Um but and automatically go, well, it's asexual. Like
Mm.
the whole of it is asexual because Dread is very much codified as being asexual. But it's the whole of 2080 and even really Dread is not entirely. It's just that 2080 started, at least, as a kids comic
Mm.
and is kind of boxed into being this thing where sex and the concept of sexuality in general exists within that universe or within the Dread universe, but it's very abstinence friendly,
Mm.
which I kind of it fascinates me, you know? Because it was 2080 is initially was initially, still kind of is, coded as being, like, for children between the ages of, like, maybe 8 and, I don't know, 18, I guess,
Mm.
if we're kinda stretching it out. It obviously has a much larger adult audience and, legacy readers and things like that, but sex exists in the 2080 universe. It's just kind of got it's, what is it that we were kind of talking about? It's seen as, almost a joke or a weakness.
Yeah, yeah, and it's something that I mean, you read kids comics from the 1970s,
Mm.
and you wouldn't be able to work out how human beings reproduced because there's absolutely no mention of it whatsoever beyond the girls comics that for well, I was about to say for better or for worse, but for worse, really, evolved into like the teen magazines, the photo
Yeah,
magazines. There is there's a kind of hegemonic project there of trying to prepare girls for the world without actually preparing them.
yeah,
There's no real mention of the birds and the bees, but there's love, there's romance, um, uh, there's kissing, hugging,
mhm,
everything up until beyond that point.
yes.
But in the boys' comics, almost completely absent as a
Yeah,
concept.
it's almost like a distraction method. It's like, "Look, we know that you're thinking about
Mm,
this, but we're
yeah.
gonna make sure that DR and Quinch don't make any, whacking off jokes."
You look at what was happening around, well, preceding 2000 AD and around 2000 AD. And in the 1970s, you've got the Oz trial,
Mhm,
where which is an obscenity trial, effectively, uh, and Britain, in particular, is still a deeply puritanical Christian country at that point. Um, you've got Mary Whitehouse walking around, calling. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. She described Doctor Who as tea time brutality for tots.
That's such a good quote.
And and she was one of the reasons why she had so much power was because she was beloved by the print media, especially
Mhm,
because she was always ready to condemn something, or she made good copy more than anything. But Britain was still very much in the grip of what was effectively an Edwardian culture, which is why the teenager was so threatening in the
yes,
1960s and 1970s, and our teenage rebellion came a little bit later than America's. Um, but you've got the Teddy Boys, you've got the mods, and then inevitably the hippies, the punks, and one of the things that all of those youth subcultures came with was an element of sexuality, either of codification or liberation,
yeah,
um, and that was intrinsically threatening to a very straight laced society. So the 1970s, and we've both written about this, is both a decade of liberation and repression,
Yeah, it's
because there's
very
always
much in contrast with itself.
yeah, yeah, yeah. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So 2000 AD comes along. It is a kids' comic. It is cloaking that which got banned, pulled
Mhm.
from shelves in genre, in sci-fi, in metaphor. So it's it takes the violence that made action so alluring and reads it in science fiction. The victims are not teachers and policemen; it's robots and aliens.
Yes.
Sex is something that people have such a strong reaction to that it can't anything that isn't straightforward, very, very, very milk toast, um, heterosexual love or
Mhm.
attraction. Absolutely not. I mean, bear in mind, we don't get a girl, we don't a girl, we don't get a female lead character until what, 1980? When was
At
oh,
least.
1978 with Death Planet.
Yeah. The well, it's funny that you mentioned, like, 2080 instead, like, tries to undercut a lot of that
Mm,
with robots and sci-fi and all this stuff, because a lot of the sex or implied sex that happens in a lot of 2080 stories is with robots.
mm, mm,
Um, it's, because that it's not a human, right? Or or there's sometimes kind of a hint if there is a human, usually it is a woman, and usually it is for, like, it's a means to an end in, like, Mega City 1, right? Like, she
yeah.
is selling herself, she is selling her wares, and, uh, and so overall, just specifically in the Judge Dredd universe,
Mm,
with one exception that I'll get to later, is that, if sex is something that happens to people. Um, and I know we kind of talked about this before recording, but it's similar. It's treated almost like violence.
mm,
It's sex is an action that only happens with adults, happens with essentially an inanimate object. And it happens to you. It's something that is just something that you do. It's
mm.
something that is done to you by a thing, or someone who has to. Um, it's not treated as, you know what it is? There is no eros in the Dread universe. There is no eroticism. There is
Mm.
no it is something, desire might exist within the 2000 AD universe, but, um, eroticism doesn't.
I mean, I would add a bit of nuance to that in that lust exists, but
Yes.
it is seen as a function. So the judges treat it in the same way that they treat everything else, which is it's either a function that must be gone through,
Yes.
or it is a weakness that must be banned.
Well, lust exists in but in some that's still kind of for me, at least, in that line of thinking, kind of feeds into what I'm trying to say, which is that, everybody in everybody in this universe wants, but nobody is necessarily wanted.
Mm, mm.
You know what
Oh,
I mean? Like, in the
I mean that's a perfect thing for the moment, and it's one of the things I've written about, which is that you look at the way that people talk about surplus populations in the
Yeah.
modern age and useless people.
Mhm.
I mean, one of the many horrific things that's I mean almost uncountable horrific things that's come out of the Epstein files is
This
an
episode just got flagged.
well, yeah. Um, an email where it was a conversation someone was having with Bill Gates about, how do we get rid of all these useless people?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if there was anything more attuned to the world of the judges. It's that well, it's this
Mhm.
teeming mass. It's almost like Dickensian. How do we reduce the surplus
Yeah.
population? Um, and you're entirely right. It's uh, the system exists to feed the appetites of people, but not to value them in any way. And so you end up with a sexless world that's full of sex,
Yeah,
effectively.
it's yeah, everyone's in squalor and everyone's horny, but you're never going to
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to
yeah.
deal with
The,
that.
the perfect example of that is the Sex Olympics.
Well, I was gonna say, when it does pop up, it is, like, weirdly Looney Tunes cartoonish
Yeah, well,
with the
it
sex Olympics.
it's treated like a sport, and
Yeah.
it's one of the great moments it was in the magazine originally, wasn't it?
Mhm.
Um, the taxidermy story, and the the reduction of sex down to sport is the most perfect metaphor for Dredd's world. Um, and at the same time, you know, we're talking about in-universe stuff, but also there is 2000 AD existing in our world as a work of art, and
Mhm.
there have been plenty of what's colloquially called good girl artists who've worked,
Yes.
particularly on Judge Dredd. Um,
Cheesecake.
yeah, yeah, and you know, if you're into that, great. Um, and you know, I've been a teenage boy. I know what's up, so to speak.
I'm
Um,
hip,
I've lived in my own filth for a number
says
of years.
local 40-something-year-old man.
Um, but you know, you have artists like Ian Gibson, for example, who would draw beautiful people in incredible poses. David Roach, whose you know, background is in fine art,
Yeah.
and you know, even you know, Carl Toscala, Brian Bolland, for God's sake, you know,
Oh, yeah.
with the original Judge Anderson. Um, so there is sexiness there, but it is for a very specific viewpoint.
Yes. We're saving I wanna save that for another episode that we have to
What?
do in the future, but, like, Anderson's a great example, and that's, like, one of the number one things that I kinda thought of for in terms of not sexuality or sex, but sexualization, Um,
Mm,
because you know, Anderson is a very powerful character, and she is could suddenly, uh, the judge uniform becomes very sexy. It's very tight. It
mhm, mm,
fits just right in all the right places. And uh and it's like, that's not even true for all of the other female judges that you see. It is just like it's just Anderson. And I there's something that I appreciate about that, and I've seen that argument made before. It's like Anderson is overly sexualized and all of these things. But if you really look at how some people draw Dread,
mm,
that's also kind of the case with him. Because I mean, the judge uniform is inherently, to me, um, very reminiscent of like leather culture. And, like well, I mean, it is. It's very reminiscent specifically of queer leather culture,
mm,
which is to say it's always very shiny, it's always very black, it's polished and tight and shows off
mm.
everything, and there are tons of artists who do emphasize Dredd despite his age and his weatheredness being this, like, you see the pecs, you see the divination in the quads,
Yeah.
you know, in this leather uniform, and I'm like, "Okay, Tom of Finland, I'm gonna need you."
I mean, I mark it down as about 19 minutes until Chloe mentions Tom of Finland. For those of you who don't know, just be careful with your Google searches, all right?
I mean, it's all great, it's all very fun. Um,
It's all great, but just check who's behind you at work
check
before
out a
you
very, very good piece of queer art history.
yeah, absolutely.
But
But
the
I mean, it's interesting because Dredd's uniform is grounded in punk culture.
Yeah,
That's
of
what
course.
Esquerra
But
was drawing on.
punk is from leather culture, so
Well, but punk was a movement that was about appropriation of symbology to subvert it. So, it was also drawing on fascist iconography, which
Hmm?
loves its tight-fitting uniforms and its jodhpurs and, its leather and belts
It's
and
a shame
everything.
that they're such twats because the clothes, the fashion.
But I mean, I've mentioned this multiple times on this podcast, but, um Susan Sontag wrote about fascinating fascism, which is the symbology of fascism is the thing that sustains it for an awful lot of people because um, it is the expression of power,
Mhm.
and that's very alluring. But that's the danger of movements like fascism is symbology over reality. However, um, certainly in terms of sex, one of the things that punk did by it was one of those cultural movements that did a lot of work with androgyny and
Yeah.
removing gender identifiers in clothes and hairstyles. Um, and so all this is mixed up in Dredd's clothing, and then you get Judge Anderson, who as you
Ooh.
say, fits in all the right places.
Yeah.
Um, and certainly other with the exclusion of Hershey, um, the female judge, and I think Judge Anon, who's
A
a great
wonderful soul.
yeah, did a fantastic series of Tumblr posts
Mhm.
about women in Judge Dredd, about how we see very few female judges. It isn't really until Decca. There's Anderson, obviously, and then there's Decca, who comes along in sort of the mid '80s. It's prominent. Hershey, obviously, from the Judge Child Quest, um, and there's not really that many more. And once they put the helmet on, the helmet does an awful lot of work to increase the androgynous nature of that uniform. Obviously, things are you can still see
Yes.
who who has which physical presence.
Mhm.
But the uniform is all about removing difference and making them all look the same. Anderson, notably, as very cunningly referenced in the 2012 movie, keeps a helmet off because so much of her personality relies on her, being able to see her face,
Mhm.
and the emotional cues that readers receive from that. It's always interesting, actually, because um, uh, many of our fans, I'm not having a go at anybody here. Um, Many of our fans react negatively to what they perceive as sexualization of Anderson.
For the most part, yes.
Yeah,
Thankfully, I feel like there
and
is that nice separation between, like, American comics and
yeah,
UK comics.
but it's also it's how um how much of a hair trigger that actually is because I've seen people post about, oh, you're sexualizing Anderson, and it's like, well, her zip is slightly down.
Yeah.
You're not getting you know any cleavage or anything like that, and so there can be uh people's perception of what is being gendered and what is being sexualized with that character in particular. It can be a very low bar.
Yes. Well, I think that that also speaks kind of to the culture that we're living in right now. I think people are just generally a lot more sensitive to that, which is largely a positive thing, but I think it can also cause a lot of overreaction in ways that aren't necessary, especially when something is being made maybe for genuinely like a feel aesthetic choice
And
in a moment.
yeah,
But
and
that
also when you're talking about female creators, of which there are relatively few at 2000 AD, it
mm,
has been and continues to be something of a boys' club. Um, but then when you have female artists, for example, drawing Anderson in a certain way, that then opens up questions of, well, is this sexualized, or is this powerful? Is this, gendered, or
Yes.
is it something else? You know?
But again, this is a thing that we're going to expound on for a full half hour at some
Right.
point,
Okay. All
because
right.
I'm gonna hound you about it until the end of time.
All right.
Um, I will say in terms of sexualization of characters, you say that with the judge uniforms, I thought of Lawless just now,
Oh,
with
perfect example.
which not only presents a different female body type in one of the judges, but
Beautiful.
also
Yeah.
but there the times when, the times when there is any, possibility of sexualization of the female body.
Mm,
There's one instance where she's basically having a breakdown,
mm,
and she strips nude and I think gets in a bathtub, if I'm
mm, mm,
remembering. I'm
mm,
thinking just off the top of my head. But it is drawn, and the female form is shown as it's a moment of vulnerability, and it is like in a more emotionally grounded moment rather than a "Ooh, look, titties"
yeah.
kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Um, but you also get like Durham Red, where I feel like attitude and violence is hand in hand with the sexuality of the character, where
Mm,
it's sexuality as sexuality as a weapon in a way.
mm,
Like this is not somebody who is meant to be overtly sexy unless you're into that kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
mm.
Um, but there are characters where there is overt sexuality in 2080, and I think Devlin Waugh is the perfect example of that for me.
Yeah.
Where back when this has become a John Smith podcast, everybody knows this. We're not going to apologize. But I feel like a lot of the stories that Smith has done, um, are the only instances where sex and sexuality are treated as an adult subject, like
Mm,
where it is something, and even though it might be very strange, there is a sense of eroticism to it.
mm.
Um, because Devlin is a very camp character, but as we all, are familiar with British entertainment in general, it's a good way to subvert something being, uh, blatantly sexual, is to add a little camp.
Well, so this, for my money, is something intrinsically British,
Yes,
because the British have
extremely.
been subverting sexuality through camp and through comedy
Mhm.
for, good couple of 100 years,
Yes.
if not longer. Um, and so, everything from Carry On through the cross-dressing of drag,
Mhm.
um, you know, it sorry, just running a Russ Abbott sketch through my brain that I remember from when I was a kid. I won't go into it. Um, that's the way of dealing with it, because people find it embarrassing, and so
Mhm.
making a joke of it, making everybody laugh, is that, oh, who wrote that book about that?
I knew it was
Oh,
coming.
that is gonna bug me.
That's it, folks. It's the daily "Let's look through the bookshelf" part of the episode.
There, a very long time ago, I'm sure Tom Shapiro wrote a fantastic article about for Shelf Dust, about
Oh, it's really
Dredd
good.
as asexual, and what sex means in Dredd's world, and we'll come on to the most obvious example in a bit, I'm sure. Um, but the release the release of tension, of anxiety around sex through comedy is one of the staples of all comedy. You are allowing people to tackle mentally things that they are embarrassed about through
Yes.
jokes, and so
It's the self-deprecating.
yeah. So
Uh,
you get Devil in War's camp, you
yes.
get Dredd headbutting his stalker.
Yeah.
You know, and things like that,
You gave her a Glasgow kiss. It's a kiss nonetheless.
um, but you know, it's so difficult because you mentioned Durham Red there, and of course she's been portrayed in multiple different ways. Where you had Carlos's original design for her, which is sexy,
Yeah.
and she was introduced as a kind of because she's a vamp in both senses of the word, as a bit of a love interest for Johnny Alpha. Then became her own character, and then had that long run with Dan Abnett and Mark Harrison,
Mhm.
which was very sexy.
Yes.
If one was alive in the 90s. Um, and you know, and then Alec Worley and Ben Wilshire in recent years have said very much that their intention is uh, to make her less sexualized. But that's then a complex conversation with what's gone before, because was that sexualized before?
That
You know,
we're
and
going to talk about on another episode because this is important. I have so
I,
many feelings. I have a lot of feelings about that.
Chloe, I'm
So,
right. I'm gonna finish this cup of tea, and you drag us back to one point.
oh, the only thing that I wanted to mention in addition to like the John Smith Devlin Law of it all was when Alice Cott took over,
Oh, yeah.
which is to say that like I feel like thankfully we're now living in a period where you can be a little bit more open and
Yeah.
goofy with it.
Mm,
But talk about sex in 2000 AD. There is a demon that is encased in a giant pink dildo because Devlin was on his way to an orgy and is very upset that he has missed it.
and it's called Titivus.
Titivus. Titty. He just calls him Titty. And the first time I read that, I was in tears laughing.
Mm,
Like, that's brilliant, but that also still in its own way kind of feels like what you said, which is subverting like sex or talking about dildos, saying the word dildo,
mm,
like talking about all of these sex objects and these orgies and stuff by making it like something couched in a joke.
mm.
And so it's still kind of carrying on that tradition of Devlin while um being a little bit more forthright with it. And I thought that was absolutely fabulous.
I mean, the thing that springs immediately to mind is Nikolai Dante, and not just
Yeah.
the swashbuckling romance of it all. And you know, you and I have talked about how those his relationships with women are portrayed as complex and nuanced, and often not positive relationships for either party. Um,
Mhm.
but then also you've got the episode drawn by Chris Weston where you have multiple bearded Rasputin transgender individuals,
Yes.
um, and that you know I did I ask Robbie Morrison about that? I can't remember if I did or not. Um, but that's using that to subvert expectations
Yeah.
about Nikolai Dante as being, you know, a ladies' man, and he's like, actually, I'm kind of an everything man, you know?
Yeah. I'm into it all.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
any port in the storm.
But it's so interesting because you know, I'm kind of conscious of time, but um, for me, the most notorious thing to mention, well, two most notorious things to mention when talking about sex and sexuality in 2000 AD. First off, is the sex issue
Yes.
in the 1990s, which I mean, I call it notorious because even back then, I was like, oh, this seems not good.
It's
Um,
bold. Bold choice.
But it was a market, you know, David Bishop talks about it in Phil Power Overload, that it was effectively a marketing exercise
Yeah.
that was, I was about to say thrust upon him, but that's not what happened.
Cool.
Um, but forced upon him, um, because they were, it was the beginning of lad culture, you know,
Yeah.
loaded an FHM, and the demographic of 2000 AD has always skewed very extremely male, and cis male as well. So, you know, but there was a huge negative reaction to that. Not just because of the quality of it, because, Space
Well,
Girls was not good.
don't even get me started. Don't even get me started.
But that it was bringing overt sex front and center, and
Yeah.
I don't know, whether the negative reaction was because, readers found that embarrassing, or they found it unnecessary, or what, but it was just one of those moments when what had been covert to a degree was made overt, and people reacted very negatively towards it because it was a marker of bottom of the barrel, page 3 stuff, rather
Yeah.
than, you know
But I feel like that can't be too much of a surprise though, because I feel like, mind you, I understand that I'm saying this as an American who has just been like studying all of this shit for years, but the it's it can't really be any surprise because the wider British culture in general
Mm.
is not really a fan of a shakeup.
True.
So, like, the idea of especially 2000 AD readers who do love their consistency, um, the having something kinda come out of nowhere and be something entirely off the track
Mm,
from what they've been used to and a comfort level, and then having that completely blown out of the water, especially in such a weird, not great way.
yeah.
It's probably just not it was just too much. It's too much of a shakeup. It's
Mm,
too much
mm,
of it's and especially all at once. Like, you couldn't have you couldn't have just sprinkled that throughout, like, gotten people used to it, like, dip the toe in the water.
mm, mm.
No, just deep end.
I mean, we haven't even touched on Slain,
That's true,
which,
actually.
very much is that nexus of very sexy ladies in not a lot of clothing, but done in such a beautiful way, and their characters play a role within that, within the main story, and they're kind of when you're dealing with anything kind of mythological, then
Mhm.
fundamentally, and I think at one isn't the crone mother virgin axis actually,
Yeah.
explicitly referenced in Slain as well?
Yes. It's so funny because I actually think of Slain as being a very female gazy book,
Hmm.
and, uh, there but that's actually oh, the I'm Slain is a perfect example of, the idea of sex as the erotic. I think
Mm.
Slain is a very erotic looking book, but
All those
it's not
muscles.
necessarily sexy. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Mhm, mhm.
You know, it's there's a, 'cause when I especially when it comes to art and to the female body and even to the male body in the case of Sling, it's, um, does something look does something look touchable? Does something look desirable? All comes back to the idea of, art being able to elicit desire and
Mm.
not necessarily just go, "I like boobies," like, check that out. It's like, look at the curvature, look at the angles and the softness, look at the texture. It's a piece of art that you can feel. And
Well,
there's something very, like, lovely about that and goes beyond just
mm.
yay naked ladies.
Well, and, particularly when you're talking about the work of Glenn Fabry and Simon Bisley and everyone that they influenced, I mean, particularly Bisley was heavily influenced by, Frazetta,
And
and
Frazetta's the king of that.
yeah, exactly, and, uh, Botticelli,
Yeah.
romanticism, all this, that, and the other, all those feed into it. So it is it art or is it porn kind of
I actually
thing?
have this is gonna be for the people looking on camera, and I apologize for that, but a great example that I would love to pull up if I can is I was actually rereading, a the Dracula book from the Marvel graphic novel series. It's John
Okay.
J. Muth doing, and the entire story is watercolored. But for instance, things like this, where it is a naked woman having her breast grabbed by Count Dracula,
Yeah.
and I look at that page and I don't go yay naked ladies, which I am also want to do in many situations. But in this, I'm like, look at, you can see how soft this is.
Mm.
You can see, like, you can see the motion of what's happening, and there's something very thoughtful about it that
Mm.
again
Mm.
goes beyond the nudity,
But,
and I feel like Slain kind of does the same
yeah.
thing.
It's I mean, you know, to go fine art again, it's like Klimt, it's like Gustav Klimt.
Mhm.
You know, his portrait of Judith with the head of John the Baptist,
Yes.
simultaneously um, uh, one of the most erotic and unerotic
Yeah.
paintings I think anyone's ever done.
Yes.
Um, and so Slain almost exists in its own bubble in
Mhm.
2000 AD. Um, but as we're coming to time, I did want to mention the other incident which
Okay.
you
Okay.
brought up before we started. No, go on, go on. You explain what this incident.
I get to explain. You were the
You
one
get to
doing
explain.
PR for it. It was so it was so there was a lovely instance, not all that long ago. I say that, but I still think 1990 was 10 years ago. So I have no idea what it actually is. Um, there was an instance of my God, the outrage when people thought that Judge Dredd was gay because Rob Williams is a little mischief mongrel who decided to make a Dredd story that in the end turned out to be a gay nightclub
Mm.
full of confirming my suspicions about leather culture, where it is a kind of an underground fetish club for people in gay men in Mega City 1 dressed up as judges and, you know, fooling around. And there's the famous, of course, the famous panel that everybody got up in arms about where it looks like Judge Dredd is macking on with it. There it is. For those,
Yeah,
Molch-R has
very,
the
very
original.
fortunate that nobody had snapped this up. I think this was the last piece of original artwork I ever bought, from and was from Mike Dowling. Yeah, there was a lot of controversy about that, and I think Rob. I'm pretty sure Rob's talked about it on the podcast before that
Yeah, he has.
he specifically was thinking, well, are there gay people in Mega City 1 that aren't Devlin War?
Everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Everywhere in every universe.
So actually, and it was post Day of Chaos as well.
Yeah.
So, you're talking 2014, 2015, somewhere around there. Anyway, it was over a decade ago.
A few
Um,
years ago, as I said.
yeah. Um,
Or
but they, him and Mike Downing did this, and I think it was only a one shot
mhm,
about an almost classic story of, young boy wants to come out, goes to a particular nightclub, and which is then raided by the judges because you're not allowed to dress up like a judge. Um, and so it's a coming of age, so it's a coming out story set within a totalitarian police state. Um,
mhm.
and the obvious metaphor being about freedom and liberation
Yes.
and whatnot. Um, but yeah, there was a negative reaction, but as
It was
much as there
such a
was.
good litmus test, though. I know that there has been we were just talking about this. I know that there has been some discussion before about this being an issue of queer baiting.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I I I do disagree with that. Like, I personally disagree with that because I think that that was such a unique and honestly pretty mindful litmus test.
mm.
Because ultimately, when the reaction even before it came out, that's when people blew up about it. And then you read the story, and it was really heartfelt. It was
Mm, mm.
actually a very meaningful story, and it was also like like queerness exists everywhere.
Yeah.
Can't no matter how much you lock things down,
Mm.
like not everybody is gonna be straight. Not That's not gonna happen. It exists in every universe, in every alternate reality. It is what it is. And so being able to have that, like, that litmus test of how people reacted ahead of time, I'm like, "Okay, y'all just told on yourselves." So,
Yeah, there's always going to be a hefty reaction to stuff online, and I work in marketing, so
people get mad at our episodes before they even air,
yes, they do.
and they're gonna be mad as hell about this one.
But yeah, I mean, we've bust through our usual time limit, but it is so fascinating. I do recommend anyone listening to go and check out Tom Shapira's
Yes.
article on Shelf Dust
It's
about Judge
Read
Dredd and
everything by
16.
Tom Shapiro,
Well,
honestly.
yeah,
He's such an incredible critic.
yeah.
So, Tom
I,
Shapiro.
I I did enjoy his reaction to our episode about what if 2000 AD didn't exist, and he said, "I'd probably be able to buy a nice car."
Yeah,
He
right?
just spent all his money on this stuff. But hello, Tom. So yeah, give us your thoughts, Flitz. I'm sure that they are wide and
Aplenty.
diverse. Yeah, about this subject.
Except
Um,
don't be a dick about it.
yeah.
Bye.
Keep them tasteful and under control. We're going to be back in 7 days' time.
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
we sure are.
so, so we're going to be talking about. I think actually on a list of unique 2000 AD stories, this will always feature like stories that are just fundamentally 2000 AD wouldn't necessarily appear anywhere else, but that in itself will be a topic of discussion. Um, we're going to be focusing on Peter Milligan, Brendan McCarthy, and Jamie Hewlett's Sooner or Later, the one page a week story that appeared on the back of 2000 AD
Yeah.
for a spell in 1986, I think
Yes.
it was,
It
and then with the Hewlett drawn follow up Swifty's Return. So we go on a 2000 AD app or grab yourself a copy of the collection. And we should, meet us back here in 7 days' time for a discussion about, the 1980s in comics.
Okay.
Yeah. But so as always, thank you so much, Earthlets, for tuning in and listening to us waffle. We'll be back in 7 days. If you have a question, a comment, or a theme you would like us to explore, thrillcast at 2000ad.com, thrillcast, all one word, at 2000ad.com. Drop it in the comments on YouTube or Facebook or Blue Sky. In the meantime, we shall see you later. It's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from Chloe. Splendid Birth Rig.
See you next week.
Get 2000 AD now. Get to